Welcome back to Conversations About Bookbinding, coming to you from Bookforge, right here in Erie, Pennsylvania.
That's right.
Now, today, we're embarking on a deep dive curated by our very own honey badger binder, Edward Patrick Krantz.
It's going to be a journey through the history of bookbinding.
Yeah.
No matter what your skill level is, if you're an expert, a hobbyist, just a book enthusiast, there's going to be something here for you.
Absolutely. I'm excited to get into it.
Me too.
So where do we even begin with a history this vast? I mean...
Well, I think we got to rewind the clock a little bit.
Okay.
Thousands of years back to ancient Mesopotamia. We're talking about the Babylonians and Assyrians.
Oh, wow.
And they were writing their stories not on paper, but on clay tablets.
Clay tablets.
Yeah.
That's a far cry from the delicate pages we bind today.
You might be surprised at how durable those clay tablets really are.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I mean, they've survived for millennia, and they give us a glimpse into those ancient cultures.
Yeah.
You know, we can actually decipher their laws, their myths, even just their everyday life through these tablets. They're like time capsules.
That's incredible. So while we're focused on preserving books today, these clay tablets essentially did the preserving for us.
Exactly. And speaking of preservation, let's fast forward a little bit to ancient Egypt.
Okay.
And they preferred papyrus,
Okay.
which was made from reeds. And thanks to the arid climate, a lot of those papyrus documents have survived pretty well.
I mean, I've always been fascinated by those images of papyrus scrolls covered in hieroglyphics. It's just such an iconic image.
It is.
Yeah.
And they hold so much history. One of the most famous examples is the Great Harris Papyrus. Now, the Great Harris Papyrus details the reign of Ramesses III, and it offers incredible insights into ancient Egyptian society.
Wow. And so these papyrus, you said they were made from reeds.
Yeah, it's kind of an ancient paper made from reeds.
Okay, wow. It's remarkable what they accomplished with this seemingly simple material.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And it gets even more interesting.
Okay.
You know, we're talking about ancient Egypt, but they've also uncovered early Greek manuscripts there.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
Including works by Plato and Euripides dating back to the 3rd century BC.
That's incredible. So we're talking about ancient Egypt, but Greek thought being preserved there.
Yeah.
That really shows how interconnected the ancient world was.
It really does. It shows how ideas transcended borders, even way back then.
Yeah, and that's fascinating. So we've got these scrolls, these incredible feats of writing and preservation, but at some point, we transition to what we know today as the book.
Right.
How did that happen?
Well, that's when we turn our attention over to the Greeks and Romans.
Okay.
And the evolution from scrolls to codices.
Codices?
Yeah, the codex, with its bound pages, is really the ancestor of the modern book.
So it seems like such a simple change, but I imagine it had a huge impact.
You'd say that again. I mean, think about the advantages of the codex. Easier to read, you can flip to specific passages, more compact for storage, and it's much more portable.
So easier to travel with, easier to read. I mean, in a way, those early binders who adopted the codex format were already thinking about user experience, right?
Right. They had to. And they used a variety of materials depending on the time period and the purpose of the book.
Okay.
Papyrus was still pretty popular, but parchment, which was made from animal skin, also became very widely used.
Okay.
It was more durable, could be written on both sides. And then for covers, leather emerged as the choice material.
Leather. That feels more like, closer to the bookbinding that we know today.
It is. It's a direct link to the craft we still practice today.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to see how certain elements have persisted through centuries of bookmaking. And even back then, they were concerned with the finer details.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the Roman poet Martial described how they would use cedar oil and pumice to smooth out papyrus scrolls, and it gave them a pleasant scent.
So they were really thinking about the whole sensory experience of reading.
They were.
That's pretty incredible.
And we see other examples of early ingenuity, like the use of ribbons as hinges for Roman tablets. This simple solution foreshadowed later developments in book construction.
It seems like every step of the way, these early bookbinders were innovating, experimenting. It makes you appreciate the long lineage of creativity in this craft.
Absolutely. And that creativity really flourished as we move into the medieval period.
Okay.
Monasteries became like centers of book production and preservation.
This is where we see those beautifully illuminated manuscripts,
Yes.
painstakingly copied and decorated by monks.
Yeah, I mean, it was a true labor of devotion.
Yeah.
Books held immense religious and cultural significance during this period.
And some of those medieval bindings were unbelievably ornate. I'm thinking gold, jewels, almost like reliquaries, like containing holy relics.
Yeah, you're not far off. They spared no expense when it came to those important religious texts. Take the Stowe Missal case, for instance, covered in intricate metalwork, enamel decorations, even zoomorphic motifs, meaning they incorporated animal shapes into the designs.
Oh, wow.
It's a breathtaking example of the artistry of the time.
It sounds like a book is a work of art in itself.
It is.
Yeah.
Around the 12th century, we see a rise in what are called stamped leather bindings.
Okay.
So they started using these small dies to create intricate patterns and figures on the leather covers.
So moving away from those incredibly elaborate, one-of-a-kind covers to something that could be replicated.
In a way, yes.
Okay.
This method allowed for more efficient production while still maintaining a distinctive style. And it's fascinating to see how those techniques spread and evolved. Different regions developed their own unique style.
Oh, wow.
The Durham style, for example, is easily recognizable by its specific stamps and layouts. And then in the 14th and 15th centuries, we see the larger panel stamps being used, especially for smaller printed books.
So alongside the evolution of bookbinding, we're seeing the rise of printing technology.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to see how those two crafts were really intertwined.
Yeah, and as printing took hold, we see a shift in focus to English bookbinding.
English bookbinding specifically. What set them apart?
Well, England had this boom in printing industry, thanks to pioneers like Frederick Egmont and Nicholas Lecomte. And these early printers were often binders themselves,
Oh, wow.
or worked very closely with binders. And this helped establish a really strong tradition of bookbinding in England.
So they were setting the standard, for craftsmanship and innovation.
Precisely. English bindings really started to reflect the growing importance of individual patrons.
Okay.
We start to see more heraldic panels, personalized designs. Books were becoming statements of identity, and status. One prominent binder, John Raines, even incorporated the City of London's arms into his designs.
Wow. So it's like bookbinding was evolving from, a purely functional craft
Yeah.
to an art form that reflected personal taste and even, social standing.
Right.
That's really fascinating.
And speaking of protecting valuable items, this is also when the practice of chaining books to shelves became commonplace.
Chaining books, that seems a little drastic, doesn't it?
It might, but it was a very real way to protect those books, especially as libraries transitioned from private collections to more public spaces.
Oh, I never thought about it that way, but that makes sense, given how valuable books were
Yeah.
at the time. So we've got these beautifully crafted books, but they're chained up. Did they at least loosen those chains when gold-tooled bindings took off in the 16th century?
Well, gold tooling really marked a dramatic shift, both aesthetically and technically. And to understand the shift, we need to look at the influence of Italian and French styles on English bookbinding.
Oh.
They brought a new level of sophistication to the craft.
So it seems like every stage of bookbinding history involves this cross-pollination of ideas and techniques from different cultures.
It was a very dynamic, evolving art form, constantly adapting and incorporating new influences. One figure who embodies this is Jean Grolier, a 16th century bibliophile.
Oh, Jean Grolier.
Yes,
Yeah.
known for his incredible book collection and his passion for exquisite gold-tooled bindings.
His books are known for, they would have that phrase on them, Eo Golieri idem coram. That's belonged to Jean Grolier and his friends, right?
That's right.
Tooling on the covers.
And his bindings, known as the Grolier style, were renowned for their elegance, intricate geometric patterns, and the use of fine Morocco leather. He really helped to elevate bookbinding to a true art form.
And the gold tooling itself is a whole other level of skill and artistry. To go from those early stamp designs to these elaborate gold-tooled creations, it's amazing.
Yeah, gold tooling techniques evolved rapidly from simple geometric patterns to incredibly detailed designs incorporating arabesques, figurative elements, even scenes from mythology. It was a way to add a touch of luxury, artistry, and personalization, especially for, the wealthy and powerful.
If speaking of the wealthy and powerful, we can't talk about bookbinding history without mentioning royal bindings. Were those ornate royal bindings more about showmanship, or were they practical?
That's a great question. Well, they were certainly meant to showcase the power and prestige of the monarchy,
Uh-huh.
but they also demonstrate incredible skill.
Okay.
Royal bindings often featured these luxurious materials like velvet, silk, gold, silver, precious stones. They were fit for a king.
Do we have any specific examples of those royal bindings?
Absolutely. We know from Edward V's wardrobe accounts that he spared no expense on bookbinding.
Really?
Oh, yeah. These accounts detail the cost of materials and labor for his royal workshops. And we also know that Henry VIII, who was devoted to his father's chapel, had a book bound in purple velvet with silver gilt clasps,
Really?
most likely intended for that chapel library.
Right.
And let's not forget Mary the Circe's Book of Hours, bound in velvet with silver mountains.
So it seems like each monarch kind of brought their own unique taste and personality to their book collections.
They did. And Archbishop Parker presented Queen Elizabeth with a book featuring an embroidered binding,
Wow.
really showing that level of detail that was sought after.
Yep.
And one of the most famous examples is Queen Elizabeth's Golden Manual of Prayers, said to be the work of George Heriot, a masterpiece of gold enamel,
Oh, wow.
and a testament to the skill of those English artisans.
I mean, that's incredible. We've gone from clay tablets to gold-encrusted royal books. What a journey. But where do we go from here? What happens to bookbinding as we move into the modern era?
Well, that's where we see a fascinating transition. In the 17th and 18th centuries, there's a shift away from the highly elaborate gold tooling towards simpler, more functional styles.
Okay. What caused that shift?
Well, it was a combination of things. The rise of printing made books more accessible,
Uh-huh.
and there was a growing demand for more affordable bindings.
Makes sense.
Tastes were changing with a move towards cleaner lines, and a less ostentatious approach to decoration.
So did this simpler approach mean the end of beautifully crafted bindings?
Not at all.
Okay.
It just marked a new chapter. This period gave rise to some incredible innovators.
Okay.
One standout figure is Roger Payne, an 18th century English binder,
Okay.
known for his emphasis on functionality and his unique what's called Etruscan style. He drew inspiration from the designs found on ancient pottery
Really?
to create this new style of bookbinding.
That's a great example of how bookbinders throughout history, drew inspiration from the world around them.
Yeah, and Roger Payne was a true artist. Mm-hmm.
He believed that the binding should complement the book
Mm-hmm.
and not overshadow it.
Okay.
He used high-quality materials, innovative techniques, incredible attention to detail.
Wow.
His work is still very sought after by collectors today.
And of course, we can't talk about the modern era without mentioning the Industrial Revolution. How did that impact the bookbinding world?
Well, that's a pivotal point.
Yeah.
The Industrial Revolution led to the rise of machine-made components, mass production. Suddenly, books could be bound faster and cheaper.
Making them more accessible to a far wider audience.
Exactly.
So is this the end of handcrafted bookbinding?
Not at all.
Yeah.
While mass production changed the landscape of bookbinding, it also created a space for a revival of hand bookbinding,
Right.
with a focus on artistry and quality.
So it's like this pendulum swing. Industrialization leads to mass production, but then there's this pushback,
Yeah.
this renewed appreciation for handcrafted goods. It's interesting how that repeats throughout history. It's a great observation. And it's around this time that commercial bookbinding really takes shape, especially in the 20th century with the rise of publishing houses and libraries.
Right. So we're moving beyond, wealthy patrons and royal collections to making books for everyone.
Exactly. And commercial bookbinding had to be efficient, consistent, and built to last. This is where we see innovation in terms of materials, adhesives, binding techniques.
Give us some examples of those innovations. What were some of the key changes?
Well, one major development was the introduction of new adhesives, especially synthetic adhesives. They were much stronger, more durable than traditional animal glues.
Okay, so moving away from those hide glues that a lot of hand binders still use today.
Yes. In commercial settings, they were revolutionary.
Okay.
Allowed for faster production times, stronger, more reliable bonds. Another big change was in the actual sewing of the book blocks.
Oh, okay. How so?
Well, we see the emergence of machines like the Smith sewing machine, which could sew sections together with incredible speed and accuracy. And then you had the oversewing machines, which sewed the edges of the pages together,
Okay.
making an incredibly strong binding.
I think I've heard of oversewing. Isn't that what they use for library books? The ones that just never seem to fall apart?
You got it.
Wow.
It's a popular choice for books that need to withstand a lot of handling.
Yeah.
The development of these machines really revolutionized the commercial bookbinding industry,
Hmm.
made it possible to produce high-quality bindings at a scale that had never been possible before.
It's amazing to see how technology has shaped bookbinding every step of the way.
Hmm.
From those early Roman tablets to these sophisticated sewing machines. It's incredible.
It's a constant evolution,
Yeah.
and it continues today.
Right.
We have digital printing and print on demand, which is having a significant impact on the industry. But no matter how much technology advances, there will always be a place for the artistry and craftsmanship of hand bookbinding.
Absolutely. There's something about a book that has been bound by hand with care, with attention to detail, that just can't be replicated by a machine.
It creates a connection to that long history of bookbinding.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that these objects are more than just containers for words, but they're works of art.
Speaking of works of art, let's talk about some of the bookbinders who've helped shape this craft over the centuries. We've already mentioned a few, but there are so many others who deserve recognition.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm.
One figure that stands out is T.J. Cobden Sanderson, a prominent binder in the arts and crafts movement in England.
Okay.
He believed in the beauty of simple, well-made books, and his work really reflects that with elegant designs and impeccable craftsmanship.
The arts and crafts movement, that was all about handcrafted goods, a return to traditional techniques, right?
Precisely. Cobden Sanderson was a leader in that movement. He
Mhm.
founded the Doves Bindery, which produced some of the most beautiful examples of bookbinding from that era.
And I know you're a big fan of the Doves Press Bible.
Oh, it's a true masterpiece, not only in terms of typography, but in its binding.
Yeah.
Cobden Sanderson was more than just a craftsman. He was a philosopher, a writer. He believed that bookbinding was a way to express, beauty, truth, and harmony.
It's about more than just the technical skill,
Right.
It's about imbuing the craft with a deeper meaning.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And I think that sentiment resonates with a lot of bookbinders today.
I think so too. What about some other bookbinding luminaries? Who else should we be familiar with?
Well, Singorski and Sutcliffe were an English binding firm known for their incredibly ornate and luxurious bindings.
Oh, yeah.
Think gold tooling, jewels, even miniature paintings incorporated into their design.
Yeah, I've seen pictures. The level of detail is unbelievable.
They were masters of their craft.
Mm-hmm.
Sadly, a lot of their work was destroyed during World War II.
Wow.
But what remains is really a testament to their skill and artistry.
It's a reminder that even the most beautiful creations can be fragile.
Yes, and that's why the work of, book conservators and restorers is so vital.
Yeah.
They help preserve these treasures for future generations. But speaking of preserving a legacy, I think it's important to talk about the role of women in bookbinding.
It's a field that, from the outside appears very male-dominated.
It does.
But that's not the whole story, is it?
Not at all. Women have played a crucial role in bookbinding throughout history, even though their contributions haven't always received the recognition they deserve.
Why is that?
Well, historically, bookbinding was organized through guilds, which were primarily male-dominated.
Okay.
Women often worked in the trade, but they usually learned informally,
Okay.
either within their families or as assistants to male binders.
So they were working behind the scenes, but not getting the same opportunities.
Right.
Yeah. That's a pattern we see repeated throughout history.
Yeah, it is. But despite these obstacles, women have made incredible contributions to bookbinding. One fascinating example is Mary Collette, a 17th century English bookbinder who ran her own successful workshop.
Oh, wow.
And she was renowned for her skill in gold tooling and her elegant designs.
It's amazing. And I understand there were other pioneers like her.
Oh, yeah. In the 19th century, Sarah Prideaux established a bindery in London that became known for its exquisite work. She was a true trailblazer. Not only did she achieve success in a male-dominated field, but she also trained and employed women in her workshop, helping to elevate the status of women in the trade.
That's really inspiring to hear about these women, who broke down those barriers and paved the way for future generations of women bookbinders.
It's a testament to their talent, dedication, and perseverance. And it reminds us that the history of bookbinding has been shaped by both men and women, each bringing their unique perspectives to the craft.
And that story is still being written today, right?
Absolutely.
With new binders, new techniques, new creative visions.
That's what makes this field so dynamic and exciting to be a part of.
Hmm.
There's always something new to learn,
Hmm.
new challenges to embrace, and new ways to push the boundaries of this ancient craft. Of course, we can't talk about the future of bookbinding without acknowledging the elephant in the room, digital books.
I was wondering when we were going to get to that.
It's a hot topic that sparks a lot of debate among binders today.
I can imagine. Some view it as a threat, others see it as an opportunity.
Yeah, it's understandable to feel that uncertainty, in the face of such a massive technological shift. There's no denying that digital books have changed the way people read, and that's inevitably had an impact on the demand for physical books.
So is this the beginning of the end for traditional bookbinding? Is the art form doomed?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
While some sectors of the bookbinding industry have been affected by the rise of, e-readers and digital downloads, I think there will always be a place for beautifully crafted physical books.
I agree.
They offer that tactile experience, a sense of permanence, and a connection to the history of the written word that digital books just can't replicate.
I have to agree. There's something special about holding a physical book, turning the pages, feeling the texture of the paper. It's just a different experience.
It is. And I think that's where the future of bookbinding lies, in creating objects that aren't just functional, but beautiful, meaningful, and collectible.
So instead of competing with digital books, it's about offering something different, a unique experience.
Exactly. And we see this with the rise of, artist books, limited edition prints, bespoke bindings. These are objects that celebrate the craft and offer a tactile and aesthetic experience that goes beyond simply reading the words on a page.
It's interesting how this shift almost brings us full circle back to those early days of bookbinding.
It does.
When books were seen as these precious objects, works of art, status symbols.
Right. And it's also about pushing the craft forward, exploring new materials, new techniques, and creating books that are truly innovative and relevant to our modern world.
So it's a blend of tradition and innovation.
Yes.
Seems like that tension has been this recurring theme throughout the history of bookbinding.
It has.
Yeah.
And that tension is what keeps the craft alive and evolving.
So bookbinders today are drawing inspiration from the past while looking to the future.
Yes.
Creating books that are both beautiful and relevant to our modern world.
Exactly.
This has been a fantastic conversation. I'm feeling really inspired by, the creativity and the artistry that has gone into this craft. What about you?
Oh, me too. It's been a pleasure exploring this history with you.
Yeah.
And I hope our listeners are feeling inspired as well.
Now, for all of you listening, we're going to shift gears in the next part of our deep dive.
Yes, we are.
And we'll talk about some practical tips and resources for bookbinders of all levels.
That's right.
So whether you're just starting out or you're a seasoned professional, be sure to stick around.
We'll see you then.
See you then.
Welcome back to Conversations about Bookbinding. Last time we were talking about the impact of the Industrial Revolution on the bookbinding world.
Yeah, and I know some handbinders today view that period as a kind of like a turning point.
It was disruptive, for sure.
Yeah.
Suddenly you have these machines that can produce books at an unprecedented speed
Right.
and for a fraction of the cost. And this led to what we now call case binding,
Yep.
where the covers are made separately and then attached to the book block.
So that's where we get that distinction between the text block and the case.
Exactly.
The terminology we still use today.
Yes, and case binding really became that industry standard for mass-produced books.
Yeah.
And it's still widely used today, but it also kind of led to a decline in the quality of some bindings. Speed and cost efficiency became top priorities.
Right. Makes sense that focus on mass production would impact the overall craftsmanship. But, on the flip side, it did make books more accessible, more affordable for the average person.
That's the double-edged sword of industrialization.
Yeah.
Greater accessibility, but sometimes at the expense of artistry and durability. However, this also spurred a revival of handbook binding,
Okay.
where the focus remained on quality and artistry.
So it's like a pendulum swing, right?
It is.
Industrialization leads to mass production,
Yeah.
but then there's a pushback and a renewed appreciation for handcrafted goods. It's interesting how that kind of repeats itself.
That is a great observation. And it's around this time that commercial bookbinding really takes shape, especially in the 20th century with the rise of publishing houses and libraries.
Right, they needed a lot of books.
They needed durable books, books that could withstand, heavy use.
Right.
So we're moving beyond, those wealthy patrons and those royal collections. It's about making books for everybody.
Exactly.
Commercial bookbinding had to be efficient, consistent, and built to last.
Yeah.
And this is where we see that innovation in terms of materials, adhesives, binding techniques.
What were some of the key changes?
Well, one major development was the introduction of new adhesives, especially synthetic adhesives.
Okay.
They were much stronger and more durable than traditional animal glues.
Right, moving away from those hide glues that a
Yes.
lot of hand binders still use today.
Yes, but in commercial settings, they were revolutionary.
Yeah.
Allowed for faster production times, stronger, more reliable bonds. Another big change was in the actual sewing of the book blocks.
Oh, okay.
We see the emergence of machines like the Smith sewing machine,
Okay.
which could sew those sections together with incredible speed and accuracy.
Yeah.
And then you had the over-sewing machines, which sewed the edges of the pages together, making an incredibly strong binding.
That's what they use for library books, right?
You got it.
The ones that never fall apart. Yeah.
It's a popular choice for books that need to withstand a lot of handling. The development of those machines really revolutionized the commercial bookbinding industry.
Yeah.
Made it possible to produce high-quality bindings at a scale that had never been seen before.
Wow. So, I mean, that's incredible. We talked about technology shaping bookbinding every step of the way.
Yes.
From the early Roman tablets to these sophisticated sewing machines.
It's a constant evolution.
Yeah.
And that continues today. We've got digital printing, print on demand, which is having a significant impact on the industry. But no matter how much technology advances, I really believe that there will always be a place for the artistry, the craftsmanship of hand bookbinding.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we both believe that, right?
Yes.
There's something about a book that has been bound by hand with that care and attention to detail that you just can't get from a machine.
It creates a connection to that long history of bookbinding.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that these objects are more than just containers for words. They're works of art in and of themselves.
Let's talk about some of those bookbinders.
Yeah.
We've already mentioned a few, but I mean, there are so many others who deserve recognition.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One figure that stands out is T.J. Cobden Sanderson, a prominent binder in the arts and crafts movement in England.
Okay.
He believed in the beauty of simple, well-made books, and his work really reflects that. Elegant designs, impeccable craftsmanship.
The arts and crafts movement, that was all about a return to like traditional techniques, right?
Yes.
Handcrafted goods.
Precisely. Cobden Sanderson was a leader in that movement.
Wow.
He founded the Doves Bindery, which produced some of the most beautiful examples of bookbinding from that era.
I know you're a big fan of the Doves Press Bible.
Oh, it's a true masterpiece, not only in terms of typography, but also in its binding.
Yeah.
Cobden Sanderson was more than just a craftsman.
Mm-hmm.
He was a philosopher, he was a writer. He believed that bookbinding was a way to express beauty, truth, and harmony.
So it's more than just technical skill. It's imbuing it with meaning.
Exactly, and I think that sentiment really resonates with a lot of bookbinders today.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
What about some other bookbinding luminaries? Who else should we be familiar with?
Well, Sangorski and Sutcliffe were an English binding firm known for their incredibly ornate and luxurious bindings.
I've seen their work.
Gold tooling, jewels, even miniature paintings incorporated into the designs.
Yeah, the level of detail is just unbelievable.
Yeah, they were masters of their craft. Sadly, a lot of their work was destroyed during World War II.
Oh, wow.
But what remains is truly a testament to their skill and artistry.
It's a reminder that even, the most beautiful creations are fragile.
Yes, and that's why the work of book conservators and restorers is so vital.
Yeah.
To help preserve these treasures for future generations. But speaking of preserving a legacy, I think it's important to talk about the role of women in bookbinding.
I was going to say, it's a field that from the outside seems very male-dominated.
It does.
But that's not the whole story, right?
No, not at all. Women have played a crucial role in bookbinding throughout history, even though their contributions haven't always gotten the recognition they deserve.
Why is that?
Well, historically, bookbinding was organized through guilds, which were primarily male-dominated. Women often worked in the trade, but they usually learned informally, either within their family or as assistants to male binders.
So they were working behind the scenes.
Yeah.
But not getting those opportunities. It's a pattern we see throughout history.
It is.
Yeah.
But despite these obstacles, women have made incredible contributions to bookbinding. One fascinating example is Mary Collette, a 17th century English bookbinder who ran her own successful workshop. And she was renowned for her skill in gold tooling and her elegant designs.
That's fantastic. And there were others, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there were other pioneers.
Oh, yes. In the 19th century, Sarah Prideaux established a bindery in London that became known for its exquisite work. She was a true trailblazer, not only achieving success in a male-dominated field, but she also trained and employed women in her workshop, helping to elevate the status of women in the trade.
I mean, that's truly inspiring to hear about these women who broke down those barriers and kind of paved the way for
Yes.
future generations.
It's a testament to their talent, their dedication, their perseverance. And it reminds us that the history of bookbinding has been shaped by both men and women, each bringing their unique perspective to the craft.
And that story's still being written today, right?
Absolutely.
With new binders, new techniques, new creative visions.
That's what makes this field so dynamic and exciting to be a part of. There's always something new to learn, new challenges to embrace, new ways to push the boundaries of this ancient craft. But, of course, we can't talk about the future of bookbinding without acknowledging, the elephant in the room, digital books.
Yeah.
It's a hot topic. It sparks a lot of debate among binders today.
I can imagine. Some might view it as a threat, others an opportunity.
Yeah, and it's understandable to feel that sense of uncertainty, in the face of such a massive technological shift. There's no denying that digital books have changed the way people read, and that's inevitably had an impact on the demand for physical books.
Right. So is this the beginning of the end for traditional bookbinding?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
While some sectors of the bookbinding industry have been affected by the rise of e-readers and digital downloads, I think there will always be a place for beautifully crafted physical books. They offer a tactile experience, a sense of permanence, a connection to the history of the written word that digital books just can't replicate.
There's something special about holding a physical book, turning those pages, feeling the texture of the paper.
It's a different experience.
It is. Yeah.
And I think that's where the future of bookbinding really lies,
Oh, yeah.
in creating objects that aren't just functional, but beautiful, meaningful, and collectible.
So instead of competing with digital books, it's more about offering something different, a unique experience.
Exactly. And we see this with the rise of, artists' books, limited edition prints, bespoke bindings. These are objects that really celebrate the craft and offer that tactile and aesthetic experience that goes beyond simply reading the words on a page.
It's interesting. This shift almost brings us full circle.
It does.
Back to those early days of bookbinding where books were seen as precious objects,
Yes.
works of art, status symbols.
And it's also about pushing the craft forward, exploring new materials, new techniques, and creating books that are truly innovative and relevant to our modern world.
So it's that blend of tradition and innovation.
Yes.
It's a recurring theme.
It is. And that tension is what keeps the craft alive and evolving.
So bookbinders today are drawing inspiration from the past while looking to the future
Yes.
and creating books that are beautiful and relevant to our world.
Exactly.
This has been a fantastic conversation. I'm feeling really inspired by the creativity and the artistry that has gone into this craft. What about you?
Oh, me too. It's been a pleasure exploring this history with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, for all of you listening, we're going to kind of shift gears in the next part of our deep dive. Talk about some practical tips, some resources for bookbinders of all levels.
That's right.
Whether you're just starting out or you've been doing this for years.
We'll see you then.
Welcome back to Conversations about Bookbinding. I'm feeling inspired after that deep dive into bookbinding history. Now, let's talk tools and resources, for all you binders out there. Whether you're just starting out or you've been at this for years.
Yeah, it's exciting to think about putting all this knowledge into practice. And the good news is there's a wealth of resources available.
Let's start with the basics. What are some must-have tools, What do you need in your toolkit to get started?
Well, you can't go wrong with a good bone folder. It's the bookbinder's best friend. You'll use it for everything from creasing and folding to burnishing.
I know those come in all shapes and sizes. So any advice for a beginner? What kind of bone folder should they look for?
Well, for beginners, I'd recommend a standard Teflon or bone folder with a pointed tip and a rounded end. That'll get you through most tasks. And then, as you progress, you might want to add some specialized folders to your collection.
Okay. What about cutting tools? Those seem pretty important.
Oh, absolutely. A sharp knife is crucial. A craft knife with a replaceable blade is a good option for beginners. And then a pair of scissors, specifically for paper. You don't want to use your fabric scissors.
Right.
Because that will dull them quickly.
Yeah, safety first, right? No bookbinding related injuries.
Exactly. And a good metal ruler is a must-have,
Mm-hmm.
for accurate measuring and cutting.
Yeah.
And a self-healing cutting mat
Oh, yeah.
that will protect your work surface and help to keep those knife blades sharp.
Those cut mats are lifesavers.
Oh.
Okay, so we've got our cutting tools, our trusty bone folder. What about adhesives? There's a whole world of glues and pastes out there.
There is. For general bookbinding, PVA glue is a reliable, all-around adhesive. It's strong, it dries clear, and you can find it pretty much anywhere.
Okay.
You might also want to consider wheat paste for certain applications, like line and spines or creating end papers.
Now, what about those fancy bone folders? When do you know it's time to invest in more specialized tools?
Well, that depends on, the type of binding you're doing and what you're interested in exploring. If you're
Yeah.
getting into fine binding, for example, you might consider investing in tools for gold tooling.
Oh, okay.
Things like finishing rolls, palettes, and gilding tools.
All right. Maybe we need a whole other deep dive just on gold tooling.
I'm up for that.
But for now, those basic tools will get you pretty far, especially if you're just getting started.
Yes, absolutely.
So we've got our tools. How do we learn to use them? What resources are out there for learned bookbinding?
Oh, there's so many options. You can find workshops and classes offered by, local art centers, community colleges, even some libraries.
I'm sure there's a class happening here in Erie.
Most likely. And then you've got tons of resources online as well.
Yeah.
YouTube is a treasure trove of bookbinding tutorials. You can find just about anything on there. And there are some amazing websites and blogs dedicated to, sharing bookbinding knowledge.
What are some of your favorite resources?
Well, iBookbinding.com is a fantastic resource. They have information on everything from basic techniques to really advanced topics. And if you're interested in the history of bookbinding, the American Antiquarian Society website is a must visit.
All right, so we got our tools, we're taking some classes, we're watching YouTube tutorials. What about books on bookbinding? Are there some must-reads?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Non-adhesive binding. Books Without Paste or Glue by Keith Smith is a great introduction to basic book structures.
Okay.
A good place to start if you're intimidated by adhesives.
Makes sense.
And then for a more comprehensive overview of techniques, The Complete Book of Bookbinding by Aldrin Watson is a classic.
Yeah, I've seen that one around.
Yeah, it's been, a go-to resource for generations of bookbinders.
So it sounds like we've covered it all.
Mhm.
Tools, classes, online resources, books. I mean, there's no shortage of information out there.
It's amazing to see how much support there is for this craft. And let's not forget, Bookforge right here in Erie.
That's right.
We offer a variety of workshops and classes throughout the year.
That's right. So for any of our local listeners, be sure to check out our website
Yeah.
for all those upcoming events.
And remember, bookbinding is a journey of learning and exploration. Don't be afraid to, experiment, make mistakes, and find your own unique style.
That's how you grow.
That's how you grow.
Yeah.
And the joy of sharing,
Yeah.
Bookbinding is a wonderful way to connect with other book lovers, whether it's through workshops, online communities, or simply, gifting a hand-bound book to someone special.
I think that's a great place to end it. It's all about the joy of creation
Yes.
and the joy of sharing.
Absolutely.
Well, that brings our deep dive into the world of bookbinding to a close. We covered a lot of ground today. From those ancient techniques to the modern innovations, it's been quite a journey.
It has. And it's a journey that continues to unfold.
I want to thank all of you for joining us for this episode of Conversations about Bookbinding. A special thanks to Edward Patrick Krantz, the Honey Badger Binder, for putting together such a fantastic collection of sources. We hope you're feeling inspired to pick up a bone folder, create something beautiful, and keep the tradition of bookbinding alive.
Yes.
Until next time, happy binding.